Alright, welcome back everyone. This is the part 3 response of Final Fantasy. And no, I am not a Satanist. This is just called Trolling Religious Zealots. Okay. Final Fantasy's third response. I decided to do it this way because it's easier, and I got another video that's uploading currently at the moment. So I'm just going to respond off of this screen capture I have with, cute little video overlay. So, at timestamp 37.55, you say maybe life mattering to humans is all that matters. Well, first off, you say maybe. You use the word maybe. That means that even you are unsure of your own reasoning. That speculation right there proves that there's no perspective imperative to hold that belief as worth believing and acting on. You aren't even sure it's the right thing. I'm sure that life's stupidity and pointlessness and zero-sum result logically prescribes that it's not worth investing in because I have a brain that does rational cognition and thinking, and certain conclusions prescribes certain actions. You, since you have the mindset of a bug, like a fly or roach or something, think your desire alone justifies itself, which is stupidity, and puts you in the same stupid boat as all of religion. Actually, in a worse boat, because at least theists have a hypothetical objective, being that establishes an ought. When I say maybe, it's not like maybe I'm not sure. I don't know. That's because ultimately life is not an ought or an ought not. Life is. I don't know that you can say life ought to exist or life ought not to exist. Life just exists. It just exists. I don't know that there is a logical reason, meaning that we can't really find a rational or logical reason for life, but that doesn't impose that it ought to exist or ought not exist. So, life matters to living organisms, but it doesn't really seem to matter rationally or logically. It matters to us. And maybe that's when I say maybe, I don't mean I don't know. I'm saying that could be an individual's personal, subjective stance on why they choose life over not life. I don't know that you can establish an ought or an ought not to life, as life just simply is. I think it's interesting that we want a rational, logical reasoning for everything. To me, that is a theist perspective. And, why is there all this matter everywhere? There must be a God. It's like, why does everything have to have a rational explanation? Why can't some things just simply be because that's the way it is? There doesn't have to be a reason for everything. It doesn't have to be. That's illogical itself. Again, all these insults and everything. You have the blah 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 of a fly. I mean, just. So what was the other thing? I think I tackled both actually. Ultimately, if you think life is worth investing in, that's a subjective stance. I mean, all right. I think there was something else I wanted to touch on in this is, like going back to the whole definition of the purpose of life from a biological stance is that the only biological purpose to life is to eat, drink, sleep, poop, pee, and reproduce. I really doubt, I mean, there's no evidence to suggest this, that there's any other species out there that is asking questions of, should life exist or should life not exist? Life is filled with... They don't question the meaningless or meaningfulness of life. They don't question that. They just do what it is that they do. The only reason why we're doing it is because we've evolved to having a higher brain capacity to ask these questions and think in abstract terms. So, this is our problem, really, because we realize it. And most any other species does not. I don't know if you can establish an ought or an ought not to life. I think life is. And I think that's what Minham argues with other anti-natalists, nihilists, and atheists alike when they say you can't turn an ought or an is into an ought. That's other anti-natalists have even argued that with Minham. Okay. I really hate the stupid reasoning from atheists that think that desire justifies itself. Well, I mean, desire alone doesn't justify things, but desire is motivation. It's factually wrong, and atheists utilize special pleading to uphold it, because I bet you all don't think a criminal's desire should be upheld. I just explained that. So you all appeal to certain types of desires and think others should be upheld. Well, yeah, because things are a spectrum, aren't they? If your desire is to kidnap and enslave somebody, I would say that that's unethical. If your desire is to feel a sense of euphoria by increasing the dopamine levels in your brain, I don't really know that that's ethical or unethical. It's not like desire's unethical, period, when desire is the main motivational factor for most things that we do. So, I don't know, if somebody desires to write a book and become an esteemed author, that's not unethical, that's neutral. It's not unethical, it's not ethical, it's just neutral. For that individual who desired that and got what they desired, I suppose that's a good thing. So that's a positive. That's a pro. They got what they wanted. Okay. Only because you don't like them, it's crappy logic and worse than religion. Well, the thing about the Abrahamic religions is like, do as I say or face punishment. And the thing about polytheistic religions that I was just discussing with someone else the other day is the respect that I have for polytheistic religions. They seem to be more in tune with teaching about self-responsibility and self-accountability, whereas the Abrahamic religions don't do that. It's more like classical conditioning, which is like, mental enslavement. But no, I wouldn't say that it's worse than religion. Again, that is your opinion. There's a lot of subjectivity in this. And, there's not any, there's a place for subjectivity. But when you're trying to say that this is fact, I'm really going to draw this chart up. I really want to get to doing this chart of the natalist perspective shades of gray, because really that's what it boils down to, is that, and I don't think that's what the anti-natalists see, is that there's a spectrum here. This is why the atheist community needs anti-natalism and Efilism, okay? Because atheism on its own has no brain to lead it to logic and reason. Atheism isn't enough. If you say so. I have 40 minutes and 45 seconds. Your want does not justify or imply an ought. That's true. If I want to do something, that doesn't mean that I ought to do it. Probably ought not do it. Actually, that does imply an ought. An ought not. A negation. So, I don't know. That's debatable. Thus, you have no right to continue to impose existence. And you think you have the right to impose non-existence. I'm not imposing existence or non-existence. I'm saying that choice is up to the relevant people who decide that they want to procreate. Okay. Rational fact. Do you care about rationality or not? I thought you were for logic, reason, rationality, and all that. Yet here you are, special pleading, and moving the goalpost in favor of your bias ape ego. You've mentioned this before in a past one. This is blatantly like debunking theist logic all over again. Huh? How? You would have to... You are not making an argument. I mean, this is basically you saying, I'm right because I'm right. I said so, therefore I'm right. This is not like there is... You have a conclusion. Where's the premise to support this? How do you come to this conclusion? The antinatalist efilist argument against life has objectively proven itself as sound and rational, light years beyond your non-argument and your... Okay. Disregard for reason. I think I'm the one being more reasonable. That's my opinion. See, that's a subjection, you know. And the fact is irrelevant to whether the human species recognizes that or not. Again, you're right because you said you're right, so therefore you're right. Okay, that circular reasoning. Okay. I get it. Life sucks for you. Some people don't feel that way. Some people don't think it is. Yeah. In the end, everything dies. So then you ask the question, what is the point? And some people find the point is that it's within the experience of life itself. And you're trying to impose your will on other people by saying, no, because my opinion is that, you know, life is predominantly filled with pain. That means you shouldn't want it, and even though they do, even though they don't care that it has an abundant amount of pain. That's irrelevant to them. But your position is more important than that. Then, you know, the ability for somebody to experience being cognitively aware of one's own existence. That's more important to that you deny them that, even though that's what they want. Okay. I mean, if you say so, right? You must be right. You absolutely must be. No questions asked, huh? And 42 minutes and 42 seconds, and you say, it's just my opinion that swimming in a pool, you're going to forget swimming in it, is not worth it. No, it's not. To say it's not is to imply the following, that there's no value difference between doing something that leads to something somewhat constructive and doing something that's completely pointless and wasteful. There is a value difference between the two, by definition. For example, you think that a ship that makes a voyage and makes it to a destination safely is the same. This again is begging the question. You are making an assumption. You are saying you think a ship making a voyage and makes it to a destination safely is the same as a ship that sets voyage and crashes completely. No, I do not think that's the same. One is a negative, the other is a positive. So no, your assumption is wrong. Maybe you should not make assumptions. Maybe you should ask questions. This ship analogy is strongly analogous with the swimming one. There is a real rational difference between the two. One is good because it's constructive. The other is bad because it's wasteful. That's rationality for you. Your argument that riding a ship destined to pointlessly sink is that you feel it's good enough. That's not reason or good logic. So my explanation is objectively more rational than yours. If something is pointless or wasteful, it's intrinsically not worth doing. So you're comparing life to setting a voyage on a ship that crashes. That is a good analogy. That is a good analogy. However, one could also say that the voyage on the ship before it crashed, even though it led to death and catastrophe, and even though it is a negative and not a positive that it didn't reach its destination, who's to say that some people on that ship had the time of their lives before they died? And I find it, it's an analogy, but to draw a direct comparison to riding a ship and that which is life, which is being cognizant and aware of one's own cognizance, is very different. I don't know, if it's a good idea to say that they are so much alike that analogy is 100% foolproof. All right. I am going to go to the next one, since that didn't take very long, the part 4, so we can just get this out of the way. All right. Here we go. The fourth and final one. 44 minutes, 15 seconds, and you claim death makes life have a point. That's stupid logic. Okay. That's like saying, what's the point of the ship if it doesn't crash and shipwreck somewhere? No, that's not it at all. It's like saying the value of life is diminished by the idea of life eternal. Again, this analogy of the ship, while it serves its point for a brief minute, it ceases to lose its point right here. Your silly logic doesn't make any damn sense. Well, that's because I'm not trying to compare life to a voyage on a ship. A voyage on a ship is part of a life experience. Experiencing life itself is much grander than the experience of riding on a ship to a final destination. It's very different. Very different indeed. The ship does not grant you cognizance. You have to be cognizant in order to experience the ship ride in the first place. So this is where this analogy comes to an abrupt halt for me. It doesn't need to end for it to be meaningful or have a point, you dingbat. What? Life doesn't need to end. I don't know. If you lived forever, I would imagine that would become extraordinarily exhausting. Just exhausting and boring. Eternity is a long fucking time. I don't think humankind can really truly fathom what eternity is. I think we can conceptualize eternity, but beyond that, no. Your brain is just scapegoating past arguments from theists and pretending I'm making the same or similar argument. I'm actually not. Don't scapegoat their arguments onto mine. Sure, fine. 46 minutes. Appealing to rarity is a fallacy. There is no such thing as a fallacy called appealing to rarity. It's not a fallacy recognized in a... Okay, thank you for saying that. Philosophical debates, perhaps, but I don't care. Okay? The fact is that just because something is rare doesn't imply it must be preserved. If you disagree with that, then deductively you think that rare genetic disorders ought to keep happening or be preserved somehow. That is an assumption. No, that is a different type of... That is a negative rarity as opposed to a positive rarity. Why do we mix these things up? Like, that is one of the ways that we can assess the value of something, is how finite the thing is, how rare it is to come across. That goes for things that are positive. Things that are negative, like if it's rare to have there's a penile cancer out there that only exists if you're uncircumcised. It affects the foreskin, but even still, it only affects, I think, like 1% or 5% or something like that. So the possibility of getting that cancer is like super duper slim, and just because it's rare doesn't mean that it is valuable, because nobody wants to get that. In fact, I would say the less value, or the more rare it is, the better, because it is the difference between a pro and a con. So you're taking a pro rarity and comparing it to a con rarity. Interesting. Fun. Okay, so suppose there was a rock that was in the perfect shape of a nose. That's a 1 in a trillion or more chance that rock would turn out that way. Should people freaking die over preserving that stupid rock? Who says they have to die? Why can't they just preserve it? Solely because it's rare shape? No. No. My answer to that is no. Nothing of real value is lost if the rock got utterly destroyed. We're not talking about a lot of rock. We're talking about consciousness. So you see, appealing to rarity is fallacious. Well, it depends on what you're talking about. I would say rarity would probably fall into an intrinsic argument not intrinsic, inductive argument rather than deductive. 54 minutes, 40 seconds. You say, subjectively, you desire observing existence. That's fine. That's a descriptive claim. It is an is that you and many other silly pro-life atheists desire to observe reality and desire to impose other life forms into reality to observe it. That's fair. That's a descriptive fact. The point here is the prescriptive, and that's what I'm getting at. You're coming from the stance that life shouldn't exist because it's not worth it, and we're coming from a stance life should exist because it is worth it. These are perspectives. The point here is the perspective. Okay, you can say that. Unless you have a perspective to why anybody ought to be observing the universe is BS, at the risk of getting tortured by existence, chaos, you have absolutely no right to impose life onto another creature. That's where your opinion is. That's where we differ. And you observing reality doesn't accomplish anything objective anyway, but also you're going to forget seeing what you've observed. No good reason to preserve a person's observations. This rationality makes your observations pointless, and logically, nobody should be imposing it. It's just objective logic. It's not my opinion. There's a real difference between observing and remembering permanently and observing and forgetting. They're not the same. That's an interesting flip. You see me as the authoritarian. I'm not saying that you have to reproduce. I'm saying it's an individual's choice. So I'm not saying you should reproduce. I'm not saying that you should not reproduce. I'm saying that that is choice. That is going to happen. So again, I would just talk about the story that I told you about the disassociative trip. Yeah, I need to make that chart so you can see what I'm talking about. So, hold on a second. We're gonna go ahead and do that. Flip to this camera, and I'm gonna make the chart in how many minutes are we at here? 28? Nah. I'll make it a separate video. I'll make the chart so you can see the spectrum of from anti-natalism to pro-natalism, and then neutral-natalism in the middle. Because this is how ethics play out too. Like meta-ethics. It's a spectrum. There's, not very willing to criticize ethics and morality to very willing. And then in the center, kind of a balance. So, that's where you find atheistic subjective morality and atheistic objective morality is somewhat in the center. Okay. Well, I'm gonna cut it off here because the other ones were extraordinarily long, and so this is part 3 and 4, and yeah. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Like, share, subscribe. Hit the bell button on any channel you're subscribed to. And with that, I'm out.